Last year, the U.S. Federal Reserve began the journey of finding out the implications of structural racism on the economy. And so the Minneapolis Fed started a series called Racism and the Economy. The most recent focused on the economics profession. And with us today is Dr. Trevon Logan, who is an economics professor at The Ohio State University. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Logan. Okay, great. Well, Dr. Logan, in your 20 years in the profession, your research has covered quite a wide range. Can you just tell us briefly what drew you to the economics profession and how you view your role as an economist?
What drew me to the economics profession was its ability to answer such a broad range of questions relating to individual human behavior and then also thinking about macroeconomic behavior, about entire economies and the way that we produce and consume. And that is, I think, one of the biggest draws of economics is the absolute breadth that it takes in terms of the totality of the human experience. Now, my own approach to economics is I'm an economic historian, so I'm thinking about and researching how our current economic situation relates to and walks down a path set by some of the historical experiences that we've had.
All right. Thank you very much for laying that out for us. So during the Fed's event, you and many others explained the race problem in the economics profession, or rather several problems. So beyond the representation issue, that there are not enough people of color represented in the economics profession, how would you characterize the race problem in what you and many others have called the flawed profession?
Yes, I think the race problem in economics is particularly pertinent because it isn't just about numbers in the profession. That is certainly something we've seen in many other fields. In economics, there's also a critical problem in that we're a social science and we have not developed theoretically a broad range of tools to help us answer racial questions. And this really has us relatively flat-footed to describe issues like racial inequality, racialized violence, and historical disenfranchisement of African Americans in particular in history. So the tools of economics have just not incorporated this fundamental way in which we've had racial divisions. And so therefore people interested in racial economic issues might actually choose to go outside of the economics profession because they'd have a broader range of tools to tackle those questions.
One thing you noted during the panel I found very interesting is that some things in this profession, in the process to becoming an economist, that may appear race neutral can actually have a disparate impact. So, for instance, you talked about the time it takes to publish research. Can you explain why this is a unique issue?
It's a unique issue. I'm also an academic administrator, and I can say economists are about the slowest people on earth, although we deal with these things that are incredibly dynamic. Relative to other social sciences, and certainly relative to the natural sciences, the economics profession takes a very long time, and in my opinion, far too long to disseminate the research that we produce. It is not uncommon for research to take several years, not from the time that the research is to undertake a project, but from the time of the completion to the project to its eventual publication. There are horror stories in the profession of papers hanging around for half a decade, for example, before they're published in an outlet. And this is hurting us as a scientific field because we're spending so much time revising and perfecting papers that it limits our ability to produce new research. And that is really hurting us as a profession.
Something else you noted hurt the profession is that essentially it has bad PR. I mean, not a lot of children grow up saying, I want to be an economist when I grow up. So how do you view the current pipeline and process to get kids interested in the economics profession?
I think the first thing we have to recognize is that a lot of people are interested in the economy, right? I can't think about anyone talking about our political situation, our social situation, international affairs that does not also mention the economic component behind it. If you think about the work that we're seeing now about racial disparities, it certainly has a strong historical and economic historical component to it. The problem is there's a disconnect between understanding economics as something about the distribution of goods and services to what economists do and the way that economic research is produced. So people come in with a natural affinity to economic topics, understanding that they're important. And then we start teaching them these really basic and almost devoid of any reality models about supply and demand. And we basically turn them off. Then when they see economists discussing some of these issues, they appear to have no relationship to the human dimension. If you think about the economics debates about the most recent Recovery Act and the stimulus packages, many times they were divorced from a real consideration of the human dimension of suffering that's been occurring during the pandemic. And so people are really turned off by what they see as economists almost being uncaring about humans in what is a science.
Very important to note the importance of humanizing what economics is, because as you and other people on the panel said, economics is about people first, numbers second, I would imagine. And so I'm wondering though, what do you think is actually working, quickly if you can share, in marketing the economics profession?
Well, I think one thing that is working are panels like what the Federal Reserve is putting on to really tell people how the economics profession is changing and is taking on these really deep structural issues. If we think about the fact that the economics profession has done, as a profession, a code of conduct, we've done a climate survey for the profession, and we're recognizing the deep challenges that we face moving forward. But this has been part of a process that the profession has undertaken for several decades now. We have a wonderful summer program to encourage students from diverse backgrounds to consider economics as a career. We have a mentoring program for graduate students in economics, and I'm the co-director with Francisca Antman of the University of Colorado to encourage a diverse range of graduate students to once again enter into the professorate. We have the Diversity Initiative for Tenure in Economics, which is a program designed to have assistant professors in economics departments who can further in their research. So there are a number of things that we're doing to try to help this process. And I think what we're facing for the first time, thankfully, is institutionalized support across the profession for these efforts.
Very good to know that as well. In the last about 20 seconds that we have, what's the most important thing to know about raising the next generation of economists?
That the next generation of economists are going to have to grapple with issues that we don't even know are issues yet. If we think about one of the wonderful things about the dynamics of the economy is that it's always changing. We do not participate in a static profession. The economic problems that we're going to face in the next 20 and 30 years, some of them we don't even understand as problems today. And the great thing about economics is that it's such a powerful toolkit, not only to understand current problems, but to understand problems of the past, but also to imagine and think about problems of the future.
Dr. Trevon Logan, really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much. Dr. Trevon Logan is the Hazel C. Youngberg Distinguished Professor of Economics at The Ohio State University.